The Roy and Jerry Browning gift was provided in honor of Roy W. Browning, Sr., a distinguished and renowned educator in the state of Kansas. The funds are dedicated to both student scholarship and faculty development to enhance teaching and learning. Ottawa University is proud to be able to sponsor Battling Burnout in Higher Education.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today as we listen to our guest speaker, Mr. Carter Campbell, talk about battling burnout in higher education. But before we begin, it's important to recognize the reason we are here, and that is due to the generous donation from Roy and Jerry Browning, a gift that was provided in honor of Roy W. Browning Sr., who was a distinguished and renowned educator in the state of Kansas. Today, I also pass along the sad news regarding the passing of Dr. Roy W. Browning Jr. and would like to honor him by reading about his life from the words of his loved ones. So Dr. Roy W. Browning Jr. of Topeka, Kansas, passed away on February 18th, 2021. He was born October 2nd, 1928 in Oketo, Kansas, the son of Roy W. Browning Sr. and Elva B. Ward Browning. Roy earned several degrees over a lifetime of learning, beginning with his graduation from Ottawa University in 1950 and culminating in a doctorate of education from the University of Kansas in 1968. After receiving his Master of Divinity from Phillips University in 1955, Roy served as chaplain in the United States Air Force on active and reserve duty for 32 years, retiring with the rank of colonel. With over 25 years in central administration and public schools, Roy retired in 1991 as Assistant Superintendent of Continuing Education Services. Roy was a member of the Westside Christian Church, Topeka, for over 60 years, serving in various roles, including elder. He actively participated in numerous professional and civic organizations at local, state, and national levels, including Rotary International, the American Red Cross, and the Board of Trustees at Ottawa University. While Roy's service to community and country gave him great purpose, his strong Christian faith and love for his family were the hallmark of his life. Married to Geraldine L. Green on December 27, 1950 in Cortland, Kansas, they had recently celebrated their 70th wedding anniversary. Whether known as Roy, Daddy, or Papu, this servant of God will be greatly missed by family and friends. Those at Ottawa University that knew Roy will always remember his positive attitude and his redefined and how he redefined and exuded positivity. Executive Nancy Wingert says that when she was in his presence, his smile continually encouraged and blessed her. Roy truly understood how to communicate thankfulness for his life and the opportunities he had been afforded. Roy loved people, and people loved to be around Roy. Dr. Terry Haynes said that Roy was an encourager, a mentor, and a good friend. He will be deeply missed by thousands. For his life and those he touched, and the generous donation that has allowed us the opportunity for development, we are truly thankful and humbled by the life of Dr. Roy Browning Jr. So as I turn this over to our guest speaker today, I would like to now go ahead and introduce Carter Campbell. Carter is an experienced international speaker, facilitator, trainer, and author. He has an extensive background in organization development, focusing on the integration and impact of leaders, teams, and processes and environments as they relate to organization performance. He holds a certificate from Villanova University in Lean Six Sigma process improvement and has been recognized 3 times by the Franklin Covey Company for his work with organizations, individuals, and the community. In his most important role, he is husband to Roy Campbell and Sean and Courtney's dad. So just a few housekeeping items. Make sure that you stay muted. We would love to see your faces. That kind of helps us as Carter's going to have lots of engaging opportunity for us to talk with one another. So if you can turn your camera on, that's great. I will be monitoring chat, so if you have questions, you can post them there. And then there is a chance at the end that you will be able to unmute and ask questions as well. So Carter, I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to you now.
Okay, Andrea, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I would like to extend my thanks to Andrea and all the support she's given me through this. I know she's got lots bigger hats to fill than holding my hand, but she's done a great job of helping me link up and understand how Ottawa University has this program. I'd also like to thank Karen Bryson and also Ruth Burkhart, who threw my name out there. Ruth and I go way, way back. And you're very lucky to have her. It was good to reconnect with her through this program. I'd like to start with a couple of things. Number one, there is a handout for this program in the chat. So I've placed that in there at the very first. So if you want to download that now, if for some reason you missed, I'd like to make a disclaimer very quickly. And that is, number one, I am not a mental health professional. I'm a facilitator, I do organization development, and I'm an executive coach. And my approach to looking at this issue of burnout, or my expertise, is recognizing it in some of my clients and some of their teams. And so that's going to be our focus today, is on the personal and professional issues with a portion on clinical components for reference. Our roadmap for today's program will be to give the general definition of burnout. We will look at it in terms of the impact on higher education from a higher education perspective. I think every definition has the clinical symptoms of burnout, but the causes can be different. So then we'll go over some general strategies that we found throughout our time, and then go into creative methods that I've found in higher education, and also some specific ideas for Ottawa. Those won't be coming from me, those will be coming from you. As we look at the definition of burnout, it comes from about the 1940s, and it actually came about with the cessation of operation, usually of a jet or rocket engine, also the point at which burnout occurs. And I think they really could have stopped there with the definition, but they rephrased it into our working definition, which is exhaustion of physical or emotional strength or motivation, usually as a result of prolonged stress or frustration. When we look at the general problems with burnout and the general causes, we look at number of hours worked. I don't know why, but for some reason, I know folks that measure productivity by the hours you're at the office versus output. And so the hours worked can be an issue. It can be because of the workload that you have, but for the most part, it's, again, number of hours worked, the amount of responsibility that's on your shoulders, your management style. And I want to take a step back here, because when I talk about management style, it could be your management style, it might be somebody else's. And if you are in a leadership role during this program, what I would like you to think about is your own management style plus, so I'm giving you two assignments. One is to think about yourself in terms of burnout. The other is to think about how you may be causing burnout in your staff, which is a very, very real issue, and one that I deal with a lot. And I got to tell you, I know from experience, I had my staff revolt on me once, and I tell my clients that everything I've learned by making mistakes, and I just hope not to make them again. Along with that is alignment of skills and interest with the role. And when I say alignment of skills, it's being sure that they're lined up for the current capabilities. Sometimes we have, especially in this pandemic time, a situation where our platform skill sets all of a sudden don't align with this virtual world that we have. And we're very used to the interaction. I know as a facilitator, I'm used to reading body language. The problem I had when we moved to this was I lost that. And so then I had to start reading more facial expressions, et cetera. And so we have to be sure that the skill alignment is there, and also that the person has an interest in the role. Now, roles sometimes pivot and roles sometimes go away. And we need to watch over those folks as well. Strained relationships. With strained relationships, it's that person, and we like to say, well, if you got a strained relationship, just deal with it or just brush it off. But let's face it, they impact us. And sometimes we can't get away with those strained relationships because we have to work with those people very closely. Another one is neglecting non-work identities. That's what I would call your personal life, to be plain and simple. And when I say neglecting non-work identities, we have two parts to us. We have the personal life, we have the professional life. A lot of people like to say we separate those. I like to say there's no way you separate those. How many times do you get a call about the soccer team at work? And how many times do you get called about a reminder of a meeting at home? Now, there are times when we can separate them, but they're very intertwined and we need to understand that. I think we go through seasons of imbalance, but we have to build trust with both sides, both the work side and the professional side, so that when it does get out of balance, we have trust that it'll be back into play. The example I would give is I was on a team that was doing a quality project. At the same time, my son was getting ready to go off to college, first one out of the nest. Well, when it came time to move my son into the dorm, guess where I was? I was at that dorm. This is my son, but I had enough trust with the organization I worked for that they knew anything I needed to do would be picked up and taken care of when I got back. So when I got back, I'm burning the candle at both ends. I'm getting the reports done. I'm meeting my professional obligations. Families kind of get neglected, but they understood that once that was done, I would return the balance. And so it's keeping that balance between the two and not letting one get out of kilter with the other. Pardon me? Keep going. Somebody needs to mute. Lack of physical well-being is another one. And in this COVID environment, what we're finding out now is that there are long-term effects to this disease. And so as leaders and as colleagues, if somebody comes back from a COVID furlough, we need to realize that they may not be 100%. There are lots of things that are still impacting. We like to think it acts like the flu and it goes away. What we're finding now is it doesn't. And there are lots of people that have long-term relevance. And that's why I say in all of these general causes of burnout, I think it's important for us to keep these in our hip pocket and be situationally aware of those around us so that we can help them as well. Because we talk about burnout in terms of our personal, but we need to talk about burnout in terms of our team and what we're doing to our team. Burnout warning signs, things to look for. The feeling that every day is unproductive. And I don't know about you, but I've had a few of those and they don't feel good. But if I look back, I can pull something out of it. Constant fatigue. This goes with the depression of burnout, overworked, and knowing that somebody is being neglected. And then a significant negative depression. Usually these manifest themselves physically as well. And so you can go ahead and take a look at where that happens. And again, just be situationally aware of the people around you so that you can be a good team player. Now, I would like to do a brief poll. And my question to you is, to what extent do you currently feel stress? So I'm going to pull up the little polling thing that they've given us here in Zoom. I'm going to launch this polling. I'm going to give all 26 people that are on this call, 25 because one's me, a chance to answer this question. So here are your results. Hopefully you can all see that on your screen. So nobody has no stress. Let's just take that off the table right now. So this is a good place for you to be.
Sarah.
Percent have a little stress. And 52% have somewhat. Very is 29%, and extremely is 14%. So when you look at the somewhat to extremely, that makes up most of the stress here. And I will tell you, it's higher than the morning group that we had, but not as bad as your industry has to say. So with that, I'm going to take you to this next. Figure. From the Chronicle of Higher Education, they commissioned a survey. Comes from the article of On the Verge of Burnout, COVID-19's Impact on Faculty Wellbeing and Career Plans. This is from 2020. So I had one comment last year. I wonder what it's like now, but you can see their figures. Only 2% had none at all. 7% had a little, 21% somewhat, but look at the very and extremely. Now, to note, they hadn't settled into probably where they needed to be in terms of COVID. And so there was probably a lot more turmoil at that point in time. But as you can see, those numbers for the industry of higher education are quite a bit higher. So general burnout prevention tips before we jump into specifics. These are ways of coping with general burnout. Eliminate your time or time with colleagues that are not supportive. Be done. Excuse me for just one moment. Okay. If you haven't muted your microphone, please do so now. Thank you. Take vacations. Well, you know, we throw that out there. We say eliminate or limit your time with work colleagues that are non-supportive. I don't know anyone on a team that can do that and be effective as a team. Take vacations. I can hear it now. And when am I going to do that? With all of the things I've got to do, heavens forsake. Then we have learn to refresh. And it's these 4 areas that we will talk about later. Mental, physical, spiritual, and social emotional. This is part that is on the new handout that I put out. Your colleagues from this morning won't have that. But again, it's one of those things that we really need to take a look at and be conscious in terms of refreshing ourselves. So it's kind of like take vacations. I love that part because everybody takes their cell phone with them. Everybody stays connected. And one of the things I've found from doing focus groups and working with CEOs is that they can't take a vacation if they don't take their cell phone because they can't relax. So we need to be aware of our brave new world of connectedness and electronic leashes. So here is your group work. I'm going to split you up into groups in just a second. And I want you to think about and discuss, related to the pandemic, what are the stressors, both personally and professionally, that you're dealing with? We're going to be moving fast because of the time frame we have to cover the material that we have. So it'll be about 5 minutes. I suspect it'll be a little bit more. Please have someone in your group ready to report out the top 2. And I will try, and it hasn't been working today, but in Zoom we can send a broadcast message. I will try to do that when we get close to time to cut. At the end, what you'll see is then a countdown that will bring you back to the group. So if you haven't done it before, when you see the countdown start, have that person ready to go. And by the way, the group leader in each one of these groups, which you're not even in yet, will be the person with the longest hair. And by the way, person with the longest hair, remember, one of the biggest things about leadership is delegation. So feel free to delegate to whoever's going to report out. And here we go. I'm going to open all rooms and you'll have the opportunity to click join, so it will not be automatic. Okay, we are back. And what I'd like to do, you should be seeing a white piece of paper in front of you, and I'm going to capture some information here. Let me make that a little bit bigger. What I'd like to do is hear from room 1, please. What were your stressors?
So we had several, but the two main ones that we felt like everybody kind of dealt with was balance between professional and family life, and growing concerns for our students.
Okay. Group 2. Thank you. We'd like to report for group 2. That's your group, Andrea.
Okay, I wasn't sure what my group number was, so I'll be happy
I'll
to
call
report.
out the names from now on. This is
Okay, sorry. I had no idea. I figured when no one spoke, it would be me. So yeah, we also talked about the personal professional concerns for students, but we also had stresses from reorganizations within their work due to the pandemic, as well as additional workloads because of a surplus of work due to the pandemic. And then concerns for health of instructors and students, and as well as colleagues.
Okay. Group 3, that's April, Charlotte, Colleen, Karen, and Mary Lou.
Yeah, this is Charlotte. So our first one was all the deadlines we had to meet, especially those of us who have multiple level or matrices reporting structures. And then the second one is not being able to see our family, grandchildren, children, the isolation.
Can you explain to me what you just said a moment ago? I'm not sure what you explained. You said deadlines and you started talking about
deadlines, and one individual said that there were various multiple levels matrices reporting structures.
Okay.
So the complication of that, and then all the deadlines.
Who's on first?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
And the second was not being able to see family, grandchildren, the isolation of the last year.
You ready? Group 4, that is Cheryl, Jacqueline, and let me see who else here. Cheryl, Jacqueline, Ryan, and Zheng.
Hi, this is Ryan. So we said emotional strain from students in terms of apathy, but also that strain that's created when we feel disconnected, both through technology, but also through the amount of emotion it takes to deliver. And we had a second one, but as I was writing it down, my desk fell apart. And so that is now my big stressor, that now my desk is in pieces. So
Yikes.
Sorry, gang, I didn't get the second one down.
Anyone want to give me the second one from that group? Okay. How about group 5?
Sure. We had a couple that have been mentioned so far, the balance between professional and personal life, a little different generations, some personal, thinking about health, others, like myself, I have young kids in school, so trying to figure out how to balance all of that. Then the other area was the transition to different learning environments, whether it be from in-person to all online to part online, at the same time teaching a class in the classroom. So those transitions cause a lot of stressors.
Okay. If you've ever been scared of typing in front of a group, you should not worry about it anymore. So, I see some commonalities here, and I'm glad you brought these up. A lot of these we are going to hit. If for some reason you had one that we didn't get to, and you'll see why a little bit later, Feel free to reach out to me and we can brainstorm together. But one of the things I'm very big on is you saw on the basic piece how to handle basic stressors. And they really weren't taking care of the root cause. What they were taking care of was symptoms. And I believe in taking care of the root cause. And so as we go through this, I want you to think about what you would do and some of the things that you are dealing with. Excuse me for just a moment while I move a couple of these tables and get back up to my slideshow. And so most of the information from the study that you saw before pointed out some of the impact that we're having in higher ed. And I think you're going to find some similarities here. The mental health issues, for example, change in method of instruction, change in workload, and change in human connection were all mentioned. The disparate effects, and this is one that we didn't bring up, but it's also one that sometimes we just kind of scoot under the rug because we don't want to talk about it. But we will today, and that is disparities in caregiver duties, stress of women, people of color, and non-binary and disabled, and faculty who come from communities with higher rates of COVID-19. They also mentioned the institutional response, and for the most part, across the country, people saw it as favorable. There were a few hangups, and also saw an institutional response, and you'll see some of these ideas with tangible actions to confront some of the obstacles that you're facing. So mental exhaustion, there's definitely been a change in instruction. You can see how we're doing this right now by online. Some of us were ready for it, some of us weren't. Relating to a virtual environment to do process improvement facilitation was huge for me. I mentioned before, I'm used to reading body language. Now I'm getting headshots. If they haven't muted their video. And so that was one for me. I'm sure it has been for some of you. Change in workload has also been a big one. You mentioned your restructuring. I'm going to have out, excuse me, in about a week, an online program that is free to you for being part of this program that I will send to Andrea. And it is a method that I've used when I've been in downsized departments on how to be sure you're lined up on those things that you absolutely can't afford to drop the ball on, and those things that you need to just flat move out of the way because they don't matter. What I find is when we go through reorganization or downsizing, we forget that if you downsize the number of people you have and you don't change the work, why did you downsize and what are you doing to your people? So it's a hand-in-hand thing of process. So we need to watch out for that. The human connection, boy, that's a big one. I don't know who goes into teaching saying, I don't want to see any students. And so, again, you mentioned the extra stress you have now of counseling those students and getting them through. Some of them are going to do absolutely fine being on their own because that's their makeup and that's their personality type. Others are probably like lost sheep right now because they crave that interaction. And so as you go through the change in human, I have comments from the survey. Many long-term tenure professors face the challenge of virtual teaching for the first time. Tenure track faculty live in career limbo. And non-tenured and part-time professors bear much of the brunt of furloughs and layoffs. In the chat, what I would like you to do is do one of these things. If you're experiencing, and just type in one of the three, and it's instruction, workload, or connection. So instruction, workload, or connection. Which one of those, if you have to choose one, since I'm forcing you to choose one, causes you the most stress? Workload, instruction, or connection? We got workload and workload, lots of workload. I have some, well, workload's got the bulk of it. Instruction and evaluation is there. And so workload is so far the top winner. And there's a couple more connections. So sounds like workload and connection are the biggest ones. As you go through this, again, we end up then with also the disparate effects. I'll talk about that for a minute, and then we're going to get into some problem solving. When you get into some of the disparate effects, what this survey mentioned was the fact that caregiver duties, old and young, still pretty much fall to the most part to women. In my household, since I've got my household office, that wasn't the case when my grandchildren were living with me the first part of this year. I could run downstairs and keep them all focused. Of course, they're older. You can see by that picture there, some of the distractions that come in for caregiver duties, whether it's the woman or the man, or the significant other or spouse. Support systems have gone away, which contributes to the factor. There's no coping mechanism. We used to have daycare, senior care, all those have closed. Some of them are starting to reopen now, but that support system is gone. So now all of a sudden school's closed. When school's out, I always send them to daycare, but guess what? Daycare's closed too. Now what do I do with them? Along with that, we have, again, homeschooling, which we've mentioned. And then we have the counseling of students. Many of you mentioned that. And I find it interesting, we posed the question a little bit different this session. But counseling of students seems to be one of the biggest ones, because as these students have come in, the counseling workload has gone up on the instructor or professor. Here, they say caregiver duties and the disparate effects of old and young, and they mainly fall for the most part to women. The study also said counseling students has gone up for women. However, I suspect, but I can't prove it, it's mainly anecdotal, that if counseling students went up for women, it also went up for men, but proportionally. Work from home has paradoxically made me feel guilty about working rather than interacting with my kids, while also feeling guilty about interacting with my kids rather than working. And so setting boundaries is another problem that we have in terms of dealing with this COVID issue. Now, back to the chat again. If you're guilty for any reason, and I would say based on something that's been done by the pandemic, otherwise we'd be 100%, I'm sure. But if you feel guilty because one of these disparities in being able to handle the pivot of the COVID pandemic, if you would just type yes or no. So I'm getting yes, I got a capital yes, and another yes and a yes. I don't have any no's yet. Wow. So pretty much everyone. Pretty much everyone. Well, I'll tell you, when you look at stress of women, people of color, non-binary, and disabled, one of the issues they're having is focus on instruction and students, which is taking away from scholarly research and career advancement and tenure. I'm going to share with you some creative ways some institutions are handling that, but that's a biggie. Also, faculty who come from communities with higher rates of COVID-19 leading to stress because they have higher rates of transmission and higher rates of morbidity and mortality. So they may not be dealing with it in themselves, but they might be dealing with a loved one. And we mentioned the link between personal and professional. So we need to be very aware of everybody's situation. We get very egocentric, and we always think that we're the cause of other people's moods. And that's just not the case. So we really need to be aware of the story behind the story of the motivation people have for the way they're acting. With that, new and different results require new and different behaviors. And before I move on, I want to address the guilt part. With the guilt part, you're just flat going to have disparities. We've changed. And when we do that, we change up social contracts with our kids, social contracts with our colleagues. And one of the things we lack is communication. And so we need to be very clear on what's changed in our lives and be very transparent and communicative with our colleagues, our team members, and our family about what they're going through as well as what we're going through, so we can adjust and be sure we're meeting the needs that we can and creating that balance. You're never going to be able to take care of everybody. I know of a quote, I can't remember who said it. He basically said, I don't know the secret to success, but the secret to failure is to try and please everybody. So I'm going to put you back in your groups in a minute to get a little bit of think time in. But these are some interesting ways that other institutions across the country are handling things. So faculty teaching with technology with little experience. What they did was they deployed students mostly on work study and hired them to assist faculty with the remote teaching needs. Some of them are handling moderation and breakouts, and others are just flat tutoring how to work in an online environment. Faculty with young children at home, that's a big one, because I know that without that teacher that you relied on to take care of your child, now they're coming to you saying, can you explain this to me when you're prepping to get online to teach a lesson? And so there's a huge imbalance there. I know one school, they constructed a virtual tutoring core of students. They were also on work study. Now, think about it, work study, where they usually are working, those places were shut down. So it was a natural way to redirect them to still keep their work study, but provide meaningful work. And so these work studies provide tutoring for children 5 to 16 years old, sometimes individually, sometimes group. This is another one they really didn't address, but disrupted and delayed advancement opportunities and tenure tracks. There are a lot of institutions across the country that the minute COVID hit, they slammed the brakes on tenure and also opportunities for advancement. That has several ramifications, and it impacts women and minorities as well, who were going for that tenure track or that advancement opportunity. Not every university has handled it ethically. I will just say it right off the bat. Some of them, it's looking like a really good money-saving thing for them. The ethical ones got creative and said, we are going to offer to pay back successful candidates when we come out from the pandemic and start working on tenure and opportunities for advancement. We are going to pay them back to the original date that would have been feasible to receive tenure and advancement. So what they're doing is taking on all the risk and all the burden for that person that's been sidelined for right now, to be sure that they get what we in the secular area call back pay. So this is another huge one, and if you're not doing it now, I encourage you to, and that is the campus focusing on student health while faculty are providing frontline advice. You mentioned up front that that's gone up. Universities are switching to focus on faculty mental health because they've been focusing on students. But you who are helping the students aren't being helped. And so that's a huge part of being sure you stay healthy as an institution. So I'm going to put you back in your groups. And I'm going to ask the question, are there new and different ways of approaching challenges at Ottawa? On your handout, you have a section for this that says idea, solution. Again, we're going to move pretty fast on this because we still have some ground to cover. Be ready to report the issue and the potential solution. I'll probably only ask you for one from each group just to keep time. So you may want to vote on your top one. Now, to be fair, the person with the shortest hair is now group leader for this exercise, and you can delegate the report out to anyone you'd like. Just be sure their desk is sturdy. Okay? There we go. Are we all back? Looks like it because I hit the closed breakout rooms. So very quickly, what I'd like to do this time is let's start with group 5 because we started with group 1 last time. So
Sure. I got nominated for that, and the issue is the additional workload that we've taken on since COVID. The idea is hiring back either full-time or adjunct faculty or staff to relieve that workload back to pre-COVID levels.
sorry. Group 4.
Yes, we talked about the same issue, having trouble balancing workload, whether that's because of furloughs and layoffs, and also possibly whether we're aware that our perceptions of time and workload have changed during COVID from what they were before. And so the idea is opening up or improving channels of communication with leaders, with the leadership, and asking questions, clarifying expectations about the workload and timing and deadlines, and clarifying expectations about and thinking about our perceptions of time and workload and whether those have changed, whether they mean something different during COVID than they did before.
Okay. Group 3.
So we discussed students' well-being and anxiety, and the comments were, we've seen a lot more increase of students needing support based on the last year with COVID. So the idea is continue to provide the support, break down assistance in small chunks, and continue to show grace.
Let's see, group 2.
We talked about somewhat the same, only instead of students' well-being, we talked about faculty and staff and whoever works at anywhere really, their mental health being an issue right now. So we talked about ideas. We try to be pretty attainable and easy in having somebody send out, tips to support mental health, maybe even once a month, just ideas that people could do even during the workday, outside of work, that can, support their own mental health, bringing in things on campus over lunch, having yoga or mindfulness things that could be done over lunch to help support mental health.
Group 1.
So we had 2, one of which kind of piggybacks on what Andrea said. But then we went a step further and said, in addition to these mental health support tips, we need to allow faculty and staff time so that they don't feel like this is just one more thing that now we have to do to maintain our mental health, but we need to allow them time to do this. And then the other thing that was not the same as Andrea's was supporting our face-to-face instructors that had to move into new learning situations into the online. And our solution for that transition was one-on-one collaboration, which OU has done, but we want to see that continue. So yeah.
So it's instructors who've had to move online?
Yeah.
Provide support?
Uh-huh.
Through one-on-one?
Yeah. And at OU, our IT group has done that. They set up collaboration, individual appointments that faculty could make to get support. And so that worked really well, in my opinion.
Okay. Great work. I will get all this to Andrea. Again, she's loving me here. It's like, you're going to do what? We just talked about workload, Carter. So let me go back to the slide deck. That's good work and shows the creative side that you can use to address some of these issues. Again, you know, if it's a problem, don't just pat somebody on the head and say, go get some rest. Dig down to what that root problem is and figure out something that is going to really help or take away the issue that is causing the problem. I mentioned physical, mental, spiritual, and social emotional. These are basically the quadrants that we need to think about refreshing in. And I've got this on your handout for you to fill out. The one thing I want to stress here is, so example, physical could be running, taking a walk, playing golf, taking a bath, because that's relaxing, yes? And so it could be any one of those. I don't want you to get tied up into watching TV and thinking that you need to go out and invest in a Peloton. So it's whatever works for you. Mental. Mental could be a quiet time, getting into your faith, reading a challenging book, reading opposing viewpoints, taking a walk in the woods. Golf seems to fit in here too, I think. And so again, what you need to, spiritual, the same thing. And then social emotional is the only one that is something that's very lacking right now. And that's being able to link up with people that you like, know, and love. Friends, family. A lot of people have been linking up on Zoom and having Zoom cocktail hours or Zoom game time. You can be creative with that. And I know there are lots of applications out there where you can actually play a game across the Zoom. I've had two folks playing that coast to coast. One in California, one in North Carolina, they were playing a card game. And so really it's just picking something each week. Not all four, just one thing that you're going to commit to, not feeling guilty about it and taking the time to do it, because the most precious instrument you have is you. And if you don't take time to care for that instrument, you're not going to be good for anybody. Let me stress again, in the physical, mental, spiritual, and social emotional, it's not what you think others think you should do, it's what you know will help you. So to kind of summarize before we go into the Q&A, there are things that are within our circle of influence and things that are within our circle of concern. So pandemic things and isolations, pandemics, not really within our control. How we respond to them very much is. And so what I would encourage you, the circle of concern gets us very angry and is wasted energy. Turn that and focus that energy on the circle of influence. Situational awareness. We mentioned this at the start, but I want to mention it again because leadership's a choice, not a position. And everyone on this call is or can be a leader. And that situational awareness is being aware of those around you who might be having a hard time, but they're too stalwart to speak up. And so just watch your colleagues. Look for those signs that we talked about at the first and that are on your handout, and make yourself approachable for them. Continue to look deeper. We mentioned the stuff that we have on the page, the students, we talked about workloads. I would encourage you to look for new and different ways to accomplish the work, and I would question everything. I will send that link later on next week for anyone that's been on this conference with a code so that you can take that online course for free. It walks you through and has some downloadable files that, should you want to as yourself or as a team, will walk you through focusing on what it is most important for you to do, and if there's anything that you need to negotiate letting go of. And then communicate, communicate, communicate. You are a widespread organization with a tremendous amount of power. And I think that through that communication of sites, you can springboard some of these ideas that you all have and seek out information from other campuses about best practices to get through this stressful, potentially burnout situation. With that, I will open it up for Q&A. I will also have my contact information up there. If you contact me, I do not start a meter. It's completely gratis. So again, if you've got something you want to talk about or a strategy, and it's not going to take that long, then absolutely, if you email me, I'll get back in touch with you within 24 hours. With that, I thank you very much for the invitation to speak with you and to commiserate with you. You guys are a high-powered group, and I appreciate that. And thank you very much. And now I'll turn it back to Andrea and see if she saw any trending questions.
There were no questions in chat, but I do encourage anybody to unmute or post a question in chat. I'll be happy to ask it for you. I did have a question, Carter. Do you have any great authors or books that you recommend on handling burnout?
You know, they don't directly stress burnout, but there are ways to basically get the job done. And I can send you that list because it's a list.
That'd be great. I mean, we are a bunch of educators, so I have a feeling we like to read. So
I'll be transparent. You know, first and foremost, my faith, I'm a Christian. So the Bible obviously is number one. Number two, I would say 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is a good one for both personal and professional effectiveness. I would highly recommend that you get the workbook that goes along with it. And it helps you focus on what's most important to you first before you go on to the others. And then there are a couple of others, but I'm brain dead right now.
that's fine. You can send them and I'll make sure when we compile everything to send those out with it.
I will.
Any other questions?
Do you have any tips or how, if you notice these symptoms in somebody that you work with, how's the best way to approach them?
Well, hopefully you've got a relationship with them and you're not just coming out of the blue, right? And so the approach and the book I would read is called Crucial Conversations. Okay, it has situational situations in the back that you can use, but I would approach it non-threatening, using I statements. You know, hey, Chuck, I'm seeing some stress in you. Anything you want to talk about or anything that I can help with, right? And so it's, you know, hey, Chuck, you're acting like an idiot. That's not probably a good approach. Or, hey, Chuck, I think you're burned out. You know, it's probably, hey, Chuck, what's going on? I've noticed some different patterns and you're not yourself. So show empathy. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Well, seeing none, I just want to thank you, Carter, for your great 2 presentations. The last one and this one, they were both fantastic. I learned something in each of them, and the breakout rooms were fun to have with different people. So I appreciate everybody that attended. We'll have this recorded and sent out probably sometime next week or the week after. So have a great week. Thursday, if it's your Friday, I don't know, have a great weekend. So take some vacation. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carter.
Thank you.